Okay, you guys ready? All right, make me look big, okay, guys? All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Alderman Walter Burnett, Alderman of the 27th Ward. I'm blessed to be here today. As some of you may or may not know, I'm a returning citizen. God has blessed me to redeem myself and contribute back to society. And there are so many people out in society who need those opportunities, and everyone needs some help. I want to commend the mayor and the working group that I've been on working on trying to come up with policies to try to help folks to get their lives back together. So I just want to thank God first for the opportunity to be here and stand before you and say that. But also I want to thank the mayor. She didn't have to go this far. She didn't have to work on putting something in place to make sure that folks, family members who are coming back into society get an opportunity to get some help to get it right. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let's give it up to the mayor of the city of Chicago, Lori Lightfoot.
Thank you. Alderman Burnett, every time you speak, I feel incredibly emotional. You always make me on the verge of tears because of what a good person you are, but how heartfelt everything is that you do. So I really want to tell you how much I appreciate you. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all for being here. This is an important moment in our city's history. You know that this is very personal for me, and I speak on behalf of everyone here when I say that we are grateful for the work of the working group. I want to thank our returning residents working group and the members that are here today, co-chair Amadou Dramé of the Illinois Justice Project, Willette Benford of Live Free Chicago, and I also want to thank Orlando Mayorga of the Lieutenant Governor's Office and Adolfo Davis of Precious Blood Ministry of Reconciliation. The issue of returning residents is one that I think we have taken, it's way past time for us to address this. I speak to you from a lot of different perspectives. First and foremost, as the sister of a returning resident. Many of you know that one of my brothers spent much of his adult life in and out of prison and jail, and as a 60-something-year-old man, still struggles. Very difficult time for him to find his footing, to make sure that he is moving forward, to get a job that pays a decent wage. I also speak to you as a former prosecutor. I can remember very, very well sitting down with many young men who I had charged and who we were debriefing, but getting to know them and their life. And in many instances, the continuing theme, even though they came from different places, they were different races, different ethnicities, is that they had fallen off a path and didn't have anyone in their life that could extend them a hand and get them back on the right path. You know, somebody said to me a while ago, and I've said this before, that children are the product of the adult ecosystem that they're around. And in my experience in dealing with young men, and mostly young men, who have become criminal justice involved, if you sit down and you talk with them about the history of their life, you'll see that they haven't had those kind of positive adult influences in their life to keep them on the right path so that they could actually take advantage of opportunities. I also speak to you as a former defense attorney who defended many, again, mostly young men who were the products of environments where they weren't loved, they weren't supported, and in many instances chose the only path that they could see for some kind of economic freedom, and that was unfortunately the illegal drug trade. This cycle has eaten up and spit out 2 many young men, probably millions over the arc of our city's history, and even in recent years, certainly tens of thousands. It's more than past time for us to stand up as a city in a coordinated fashion and make sure that we extend our hand in friendship and support to these young men and young women. If we truly believe in the power of redemption, which I do, as a person of faith, I absolutely do. None of us are flawless in God's eyes. If we truly believe in the power of redemption, we must live those values and extend our hands to these young men and young women who have fallen by the wayside and are just looking for a hand and friendship to bring them back, bring them home. And that's really, truly what this is all about. I'm now trying to catch up with my prepared remarks, and this is obviously something that I care a lot about. Let me talk to you a little bit about why we think this is so important. Over the last decade, there were more than 100,000 people leaving the Illinois Department of Corrections and Cook County Jail, returning to our neighborhoods in the city of Chicago. Within those thousands, it's estimated that 17% of returning residents will recidivate within 1 year, 43% within 3 years. 43%. That's a failure by any stretch of the imagination. The revolving door doesn't just negatively impact the immediate individuals, but also their families, their communities, and our entire city. The impact is felt in generational cycles of trauma and poverty, leading to more desperate situations and crime. Again, I can think of a number of different examples of people that I have met along the way. When they're incarcerated, it has an immediate impact on the entire family, and particularly for women. When they're incarcerated, if they have children, those children then become wards of the state. And if there isn't somebody there to step up and help them, those children get lost in the system. But even when they come back out, those women face significant challenges to be able to get their children back and reunite with them. This perpetual cycle will continue unless we reach out with supports, services, and investments in their futures. And really, it's not just in their futures, it's in the future of our city. In order to put an end to the cycle, this year, I created a working group comprised of people with direct experience in the criminal legal system, advocates, social service agencies, community organizers, and researchers, and some of whom are reflected here today. There are also returning residents themselves who could inform us of their actual lived experience. Together, we examine housing, economic mobility, healthcare, and other topics where we heard from returning residents that they face gaps in access and support. And we look for solutions and how city government can support returning residents and their families and their communities. Together, we laid out a roadmap for a second chance city, detailing a number of recommendations on how to best give returning residents another chance at living a fulfilled life. This roadmap is implemented in our 2022 budget with an earmarked $13 million for reentry services, including legal assistance and workforce support. The working group also recommended that we create a role for Chicago Director of Reentry, as well as an interagency council to advance our roadmap, and that's what brings us here today. I will be signing an executive order establishing the Interagency Reentry Council that will convene city departments and sister agencies around the shared goal of promoting positive reentry and life outcomes for our returning residents. Taking the priorities of our working groups, a new director of reentry and the council will collect and analyze data on the returning residents' population to identify communities that are disproportionately impacted by recidivism. I think we know many of them, but the data will help us. They will engage with government and nonprofit business and philanthropic partners to build a coalition for advancing our working group's identified priorities. They will identify and remove policy barriers and regulatory burdens that contribute to the disparities in our safety nets for returning residents. And throughout all of this work, they'll be setting goals and tracking the progress of their outcomes. This must be a whole-of-government approach to address the root causes of incarceration, recidivism, and will create wraparound response that enables all Chicagoans to thrive. Our city has a lot of nicknames. the second city, the Windy City, the city of big shoulders. And I'm proposing another, the second chance city. Returning residents deserve a second chance to have a meaningful life, meaningful work, a roof over their head, and a supportive community that understands their value. Too many of our returning residents feel like they are cast away, that there's no supports for them. In many instances, they return in difficult circumstances, and in many instances worse than the circumstances in which they went in. But they do have value, of course. And there are so many success stories of returning residents, Alderman Burnett probably being top among them, that turning lives around to live one that is not only fulfilling for themselves, but for their families and their communities. By becoming a more inclusive, supportive second chance city, we're not only helping returning residents, but breaking the cycle of violence and poverty, enhancing our public safety, enriching our economy, and lifting up our entire city. I look forward to creating an environment where people like my brother could feel like they would have what they need to fulfill their God-given potential and create and contribute to thriving communities across our second chance. And I want also to acknowledge there are a lot of different groups, community-based organizations, our street outreach folks, as well as the faith community who have been deeply involved in this work for years. What's been missing is making this a city priority, where we bring people together, we break down the silos, we understand what the assets and the opportunities are, and we make this, by elevating it, a priority so that we don't turn a blind eye to members of our community who are coming back home literally by the thousands every month, that there's a place for them and they know that this city is one that will be supportive, because if we put folks back on their feet, if we give them a lifeline, we help everyone in every community across our incredible city. So as we celebrate, before I close, I also want to acknowledge something else important today, and that's the Land Acknowledgement Resolution presented in City Council today. As we celebrate Native American Heritage Month this November, I was proud to officially affirm the connection of Native Americans to this land to be respected and honored. And I remind you that we are now amongst the largest cities in the U.S. to adopt such a land acknowledgement resolution. We're starting a new chapter in our nation's history, one with honor and reverence for our Native peoples. And I look forward to continuing to work with the Native community here in Chicago and Chicagoland. There's a lot more work that we need to do, but it starts with acknowledging the history, acknowledging the people, and making sure that we are sending a very strong message and signal that this is a city that respects our true heritage, and that we are going to be working collaboratively with our urban Native Americans here in Chicago. So thank you all very much, and I'll invite Amadou from the Illinois Justice Project, who was another co-chair of our working group and really worked very hard with us for a long period of time to say some words about this returning residents executive order. Amadou.
Thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon. My name is Amadou Dramé. I'm a program director with the Illinois Justice Project. First and foremost, I want to thank the mayor for her leadership and for getting your entire team involved in this work. I've been involved in government work for a little while, mostly from the advocacy perspective, and I can say honestly that, at least in this building, many things won't get done if you don't have executive support, and so we're very grateful for the mayor's leadership, for the way in which she lent her staff and all of the energy and time that they put into this endeavor. I also want to thank Alderman Burnett, whose story should be an inspiration to all of us as Chicagoans. Alderman Burnett, throughout this process, I've gained even more respect for you than I already had, which was a lot. He's probably one of the best listeners that I have ever encountered. Nothing really slips by him, but he's also been a strong advocate for this work. Also want to acknowledge all of one other co-chair who's not able to be here with us, Jenny Volan-Katz from the John Howard Association, and countless other people who are involved in the work group. This really is, Mayor, about making Chicago a second chance city and making sure that government is involved in that. It's good government. It is good for communities, and I think it's also good for taxpayers. I'll just give you a couple facts and figures to provide some context about this. We don't know. We're still working to figure out how many returning residents there are in the city of Chicago. But the mayor mentioned earlier that in the last decade, over 100,000 people have returned from our county jail and from the Department of Corrections back into the city of Chicago. We know that in the state of Illinois that there are over 4.2 million people with arrest and conviction records. That's about 42% of our state's working age population, for context. And we also know that it costs over $150,000 to taxpayers every time somebody reenters our state's correctional system. And so it is good government, but it's also good for taxpayers, and of course it's good for our communities. This work is going to help us create a more equitable city, and I'm very grateful to have been involved in it. And again, Mayor, thank you for continuously being there, for again getting your staff involved, and thank you again for your commitment to continue working with us beyond the period of this work group, so that we can implement all of the things that are in this executive order, as well as the policy recommendations that the work group provided. And so I'll conclude my remarks there, and I will pass things over to the illustrious Willette Benford from Live Free Chicago.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Willette Benford, and I am the lead decarceration organizer with Live Free Chicago, and I am also a returning resident. First of all, Mayor Lightfoot, thank you for this. Thank you for the working group. Alderman Burnett, I have some things to say to you afterwards. But there's something to be said about a nation that incarcerates more of its citizens than any other nation in the world. There is also something to be said about a city that takes the initiative to collaborate with directly impacted individuals, social workers, faith-based organizations, policy analysts, and all to develop a framework for the Mayor's Office of Reentry. Developing a coordinated system that will ensure that returning residents will have necessary resources and support to come back home and be successful upon reentry. Investing in returning residents speaks volumes about our capacity to rebuild lives. It can be done. Failing to invest in returning residents is like trying to bake a cake without all the ingredients and then blaming the cake for not rising. Because an individual has an arrest or a conviction in their background, this should not exclude them from the resources necessary to reenter their communities and thrive. When having opportunities like securing permanent housing, employment with livable wages, and educational opportunities and trauma-informed care, those are the starting points. Having this office in place in the city of Chicago, where there are 15 communities that most individuals released from IDOC or Cook County return, is a huge shift from the way things are normally done. Thank you, Mayor Lightfoot, for possessing the courage to make the shift. Not because it is the most popular thing to do, but because it is the right and moral thing to do. Supporting those that are directly impacted, especially women, who are normally the primary caregivers of their children. When you do that, you invest in entire families, communities, and our city as a whole. This is a great day for the city of Chicago, and my hope is that it would be such a huge success that it would become a model for all cities with returning residents across the state and ultimately the nation. Alderman Burnett, you are a rare breed. I say this because you were my first supervisor after my release. Alderman Burnett, you model and exemplify what it means to invest in returning residents. You gave me my first job when I came home, and I will never forget it. So I hope others in the room and in our city will do likewise. Thank you. And I'll turn it over to the mayor for the ceremony signing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Could you all just step forward up to the table? There you go. That's okay. Maybe come to this side. Great. All right, everyone right here. 1, 2, 3. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. We're happy to take your question.
All right, thanks a lot, Mayor. Members of the press, 2 questions per reporters. Do we have anyone that has on-topic questions for today? Going once, going twice. All right, let's start off with Alex Nitkin, Daily Line. Go ahead, Alex.
Okay, hi Mayor. I actually wanted to ask about the about sports betting at stadiums. The teams, the United Center, have been saying publicly that they have your support, that they know that you're committed to getting the ordinance passed. Is that true, or do you have concerns about casino revenue being cannibalized?
You know, part of the reason that I thought it was important to have a subject matter hearing first is there was a lot of mythology that was being shared with various members of the City Council, and I knew a lot of members hadn't really focused on the issue. So I think the subject matter hearing that was held helped address that issue. As you know, there are some that believe that the sports betting will be a drain on casino revenues in a disproportionate way. Our experts and studies, you know, of course it's going to have an impact, but I don't think it's going to be materially a problem. So I do support that. And look, the fact of the matter is it's the law of the land. Sportsbook was passed in 2019 at the end of a session, literally right out days after I was sworn in, and we have been talking to a lot of different stakeholders about what form this will take. Now, obviously want to make sure that whatever form it takes is done in a way that's consistent with our zoning ordinance and obviously reflecting a building that reflects the contours of the local community, but the concept itself is one that I support. We will be putting forward an amended ordinance, and my expectation, I think that the hearing date has been set for early December, and my expectation it will pass out of committee and then go to the floor of the City Council for the December meeting.
Can you speak to what those amendments are?
Not at this point, but we will.
I also would love to just, I wanted to ask for an update on the gang asset forfeiture ordinance. We haven't heard about this in a little while. Is that still in the works? Are you hopeful that
No, it is very much in the works. We're engaging with members of City Council and other stakeholders. There again, I think there was a lot of misinformation that came out initially. So we're working to make sure that people understand what this is and what it isn't, but we will be moving it forward.
All right, Heather Sherrill.
Hi, Mayor.
Hi there.
Can you commit that the new policy
I'm always nervous when somebody starts off a question with, can you commit? This is not a debate.
To ensuring that in the policy for the new criminal enterprise information system, that people included in the database will be notified of their inclusion and educated on how to appeal that designation?
So what the general order says, and it's been out there for some time, is that if you have a concern that you are part of the database, you have a number of different options. You can go to a clerk's office, you can go to a police district station, fill out a very simple form, and then you will be notified as to whether or not you were actually included. And if so, then there's a number of ways in which you can, if you believe that your name is improperly in there, that you can get your name taken out of it. And keep in mind, because I think this gets lost in the shuffle, this compromise was a result of a lawsuit that was filed, a negotiated settlement that was approved by a judge. So the general order that the police department adapted was one that was negotiated with a lot of different stakeholders around this. So there is a set process. That process has been signed off on, and that's the process that people will follow. What I talked about today at City Council is making sure that people know that the process exists. Because if you have a process and individuals who might be impacted by it don't know, that's a problem. So we've got to do, I think, a lot of significant outreach, the police department, the mayor's office and city departments, with other stakeholders to let people know this is a process. If you believe that you're in there, go and find out. And if so, then there's a process for getting your name excluded from the database.
I just want to be really clear, but that it would be incumbent upon me, Heather Sharon, to go to the police department and ask, am I in the gang database, as opposed to being notified by the Chicago Police Department that I've been included in the gang database.
So again, to be clear, this was a process that was agreed upon by a range of advocates and the plaintiff's lawyers, and it's not just the police department. That was one of the things that feedback that we got from the advocates, which makes sense to me. You can go to the clerk's office as well. We wanted to provide a more neutral setting for people to be able to go to figure it out. Obviously, this is not going to affect the vast majority of Chicago residents, but we wanted to make sure there was a process. What got passed today is setting up a process so that it's not the police department on its own that determines whether or not somebody is in or out, that there's a more neutral process that will be run by the Chicago Police Board.
And you're confident that the new enterprise system will protect the rights of Chicagoans and will not disproportionately target Black and Latino Chicagoans, as an audit by the Inspector General found the previous system, or I guess the current system did?
Well, I've spoken about that IG report, so I won't spend a lot of time on it. But the IG report didn't include updated information from the Chicago Police Department. In fact, the former IG refused to put that as part of the report. So you all relied a lot on that report, but that report did not reflect the kind of current state of play with things. But look, what I'm confident of is that we've got a process that a lot of different eyes have looked at and have signed off on. But obviously, the devil's in the details. This hasn't been executed yet. So we've got to make sure that we're holding ourselves accountable. And if changes need to be made, we'll make the changes.
Thanks, Mayor. Marianne Aher.
Thank you. Mayor, there have been at least 5 or 6 major thefts at or near the Mag Mile. Mm-hmm. Police have increased their presence there again. Mm-hmm. The cars are back as they were before. Any concerns as this weekend the city once again hosts the Big Light Festival?
Well, I'm not concerned about that because we obviously have a plan for making sure that we have more officers, visible patrols, and so forth. But the one thing that I want to also just note is this. We started this conversation with Mag Mile retailers in, I believe, January, February of 2020. Because there were a series of robberies that were happening and resulting in high-speed chases, and we knew that that was a recipe for disaster. So we've been in continuous dialogue with the merchants along the Mag Mile about additional steps that they could take to make sure that their merchandise was safeguarded. I've had the fortune of being able to shop at some of the most high-end shopping districts across the world, Milan, London, Paris, Rome, Rodeo Drive, and elsewhere. And in almost every single one of those instances, they've got security measures that don't exist along the Mag Mile here, which I've urged these retailers to do. Things like you've got to be buzzed into the store. There's cameras at the entrance. You have a security guard at the door. All the merchandise is either chained and roped or it's put behind glass so that one piece of merchandise is taken out at a time. These are just very, to me, basic common sense things that some retailers have started implementing. I urge all of the Mag Mile retailers to take those kinds of precautions. It doesn't make sense to me, given the fact that we've seen some pretty high-end thefts, that more isn't being done. We can step up into patrols. We can put more eyes and cameras on it. But fundamentally, the retailers also have to be a partner in this work, and I'm hoping that they will. But yes, we're very mindful of we've got Rittenhouse verdict that will come down at Armory. We've got Black Friday. We want to make sure that people are able to enjoy the city in safety and not have any challenging issues, particularly around retail theft in our commercial corridors.
Speaking of Rittenhouse, what is the plan for the city?
Well, look, we are not aware of any specific intelligence to suggest that the city itself is at risk, but obviously given our close proximity to Kenosha, we are taking all the precautions. We, again, have a safety plan. I'm not going to go into all details of it, but we're monitoring things very, very closely at the courthouse and have additional resources at the ready if they're necessary.
Mayor, your far left, Mariah Wolfel.
Hi, Mayor.
Hi there. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good.
Can you share some insight into how you're feeling about the remap process? And specifically, I want to know if you think it's reasonable for the Black Caucus to take a hard line on maintaining 18 majority wards despite population decline.
Yeah, I'm not going to weigh in on the specifics of one stance versus another stance. I've been very consistent in what I've said about the remap process. Number one, it can't be done exclusively behind closed doors. There's got to be a process for public engagement. The public needs to see any map before it's voted on by the City Council. I think those very basic parameters have to be met. Obviously, everybody's mindful of the upcoming deadline, and we'll see what map, if any, emerges at that point.
At what point will you get involved in that process, if at all?
Well, I don't think it's a time for me to be involved just yet. I want to see how the process plays out. Obviously, I'm aware of the back and forth, some of which is public, some of which has not been public, but it's not for me to put my imprint on a particular map. These are very sensitive issues. This is something that's been a topic of a lot of discussion among City Council members for months now, and I'm hopeful that there will be a resolution that includes the things that I've just said, in addition to which making sure that we're not carving up city neighborhoods into tiny little pieces. Thing I've heard over and over again from residents, whether it's in Inglewood, whether it's back of the yards, whether it's Chinatown, they don't know who to hold accountable because they're cut between 3, 4, 5 different aldermanic wards. So I've been very clear about that with the folks who are drawing the maps. I haven't seen a proposed map yet, but obviously I have my own views about what should and what shouldn't happen in the process.
Can we get your reaction to Andrea Kirsten's appointment being delayed at the meeting today, and that in addition to the letter from aldermen this week, are you worried that you won't have the support to push that through?
Look, as we've seen, unfortunately, over the course of the last year in particular, predictable people do predictable things. So the fact that somebody sent that nomination to rules, not a shock whatsoever. And in fact, I gave Andrea a heads up that was likely a possibility, because we see, unfortunately, how some members of the council have used the procedural tools as a cudgel instead of trying to work productively. Andrea Kirsten deserves a hearing. I think she's the most qualified person of the applicants that were put forward to me, and I believe that she has to have a hearing and should be judged on her entire body of work, not one incident. Now, having said that, I've been very clear. I thought it didn't make sense for her, for COPA, to put out a recent report that had Officer French's name in it. I said before, and I agree, and I say again, and I said to her, it was tone deaf, and it was absolutely unnecessary. That family has been traumatized beyond all imagination. It doesn't make sense that this was done again. And I think that there could have been a different path. And I think Andrea understands she's got to explain herself. And she's got to apologize to the family. So I'm looking forward to hearing what she has to say. I'm aware that she's going to be making some kind of statement tomorrow at the police board, but she's got a lot to do and explain to the members of the City Council why she is best qualified to move from the acting role to the full-time Chief Administrator of COPA. Look, having served in that job in another iteration 20 plus years ago, it's a really hard job. It's very difficult to get people to be able to fill that position, particularly now when there's such heightened scrutiny over everything that is done by these various oversight bodies. The committee did a nationwide search and came up with a number of candidates, but identified Andrea as the best person. I interviewed her, and I agreed with the committee's recommendation. So I just think that she needs to explain herself. She should be judged by the entire body of work and her vision for moving this organization forward. And if she does all those things, I'm confident that she'll win 26 votes to be able to move forward and be confirmed.
Thanks, Mayor. Tamam Bradley, the BGN.
Hi, Mayor.
You're switching me from one side of the room to the next.
Over here.
Go ahead.
Hi there. Back to the map. So the deadline is 2 weeks from today. You say you want the public to be able to see it. What does that mean? Does that mean 48 hours? How long will we have for the public to see the map weigh in before the aldermen get a chance to vote?
Well, look, I'm not going to dictate what the timeline is, but it's got to be meaningful. It can't be what we've seen happen, for example, in Springfield in years before, where a map goes up and 2 hours later it's voted on by the General Assembly. That's not meaningful public engagement. I think there's got to be enough time for people to be able to understand it, to be able to see where the lines are actually drawn, look at the block detail of individual wards. That's going to mean some meaningful time for a map to be out there in the public view, and I think people should have an opportunity to weigh in and express their views about the proposed map, but also any other issues that they think are important to be taken into consideration around redistricting. It happens once every 10 years, and we've got to give the public their due.
Well, we know it now will be less than 2 weeks. Mayor, I wanted to ask you about George Cardenas's plan to buy the Bears. Didn't know the Bears were for sale. Some people may be rolling their eyes, but is that something you ever thought about?
Well, look, I respect Alderman Cardenas, as you well know. He's one of my floor leaders. And look, I think there's a lot of conversation that's happened. If there's what he's asking for is a feasibility study to determine whether or not it's viable to buy the Bears, so why not?
All right. AD Quick.
Hi, Mayor.
Hi there.
Another Bears question. You said you're going to be appointing a committee of folks to look at potential further uses of Soldier Field. What's going on with that committee?
We will be making an announcement soon. We're just making sure that we've got the right people who have the time and ability to be able to serve on this, because it's not just about Soldier Field, as I've said. I want to make sure that we're looking at the entirety of that campus from the Shed down to McCormick Place and looking at opportunities for us to maximize the assets there. And I think we will have a very creative and innovative group that are going to be part of that process. So we'll make an announcement soon.
Have you heard anything recently from the team about what they'd like to see? You've said over and over, I want to know what the team wants, but they haven't been as communicative as
Yeah, there has been communication, and those discussions continue.
All right, Aaron from Daily Line.
Hi there. A couple of years ago, while you were getting back to the ward map, while you were campaigning, you called for an independent commission to draw a ward map. Obviously, that didn't happen. Do you think the city would be in a better place than it is now if that had been the case? And what happened to that?
Well, I think you know that there was actually and continues to be an independent effort led by a number of kind of good government groups who put forward a map. I don't support that map in particular, but I certainly admire the process that they've gone through, and I think they'll continue to be in the mix as this process moves forward.
Ted from Chicago Magazine.
Hi.
Hi there.
Fox 32 has a new poll out, and it says that 68% of Latinos, 61% of whites, 49% of blacks say you don't deserve a second term in office. Can I get your reaction to those numbers? And also, can you talk about achievements of your administration that do make it worthy of a second term?
Well, it's way early for me to be talking about a second term. But let me just remind you, Fox News put out a survey, I believe in January of 2019, where they had me at about 1.9%. And as a consequence of that, excluded me from a debate that they hosted. Well, here I am. So consider the source is what I'd say.
Okay. And my other question is, you were just in Washington for the signing of the infrastructure bill. What money and what projects can Chicago expect from that?
Well, look, a lot of the money that's coming from the infrastructure bill is going to be competitive grants, but it's certainly my expectation that we will be getting money to help with the Red Line extension, lead service lines, broadband, building up the electronic vehicle infrastructure here in the city, and a number of other initiatives. We're going to be very much in the mix. And one thing that I was very pleased about when I was there is that the city of Chicago is on the lips of a lot of policy decision makers in Washington, D.C., which I take as a very good sign. We've been advocating all along for the things that we knew were important for us, both with members of the executive branch as well as members of Congress. So I think that we're going to be well positioned to get a significant amount of resources to help us not only address roads and bridges and other kind of customary infrastructure work, but some of the other categories that are also available for funding in this bill.
All right, Craig Wall.
Mayor, just back to the Bears, if we could, realizing that it's a feasibility study that's requested, I mean, is there even a snowball's chance in a warm place that you think the city could afford to buy the Bears in some way, shape, or form to keep them here?
Well, I didn't say that I would support the city buying the Bears, but I think it's an interesting exercise for a feasibility study. We'll see what the members of the city council say. But look, I mean, the bottom line is this: we're continuing to do our work to try to keep the Bears in the city of Chicago, but it's got to be a deal that makes sense, not just for the Bears, but for the taxpayers. The deal that was signed in the early 2000s, clearly the Bears don't believe that that deal makes sense for them, but it doesn't make sense for the city either. There are many, many ways in which we could maximize resources at Soldier Field with the Bears or without the Bears. Look at what happened with the Wisconsin versus Notre Dame game. That was a massive revenue generated a massive amount of revenue for the Park District. Soldier Field is a very sought-after venue for concerts, other sporting events, and we've got to make sure that we've got a deal that works for us. The deal that was signed 20 years ago doesn't work for the city of Chicago, and I want to see what we can do to change the contours of that deal. But we're going to keep talking. But as I said, to me, the issue is much larger than the Bears, who I hope will rally in the second half and be a viable playoff option. I see you laughing, but I'm going to remain optimistic that lightning will strike. But bottom line is, we've got to do things that are in the economic best sense of the city of Chicago and our taxpayers, and that's really what I'm focused on.
And could you give us your reaction to John Katanzara saying he plans to run for mayor? He said, Mayor, yesterday, don't ruin the office, I'm coming for the keys.
It would be a gift.
In all seriousness.
In all seriousness, it would be a gift.
If he would run.
Let him run. I'd have a lot of fun with that.
All right, Greg Pratt, up front, Mayor. There you
go. Hi, Mayor.
Hi there.
Does Kirsten have your 100% support?
I wouldn't have nominated her if she didn't.
I think that's it. I think we covered it.
Okay.
We'll do it. And finally, Mayor, we're going back to your left with Aaron from the Hyde Park Herald.
Hi. At a conference last week at UChicago, you said an anecdote about you being at Chicago Law and there being barbed wire around the lot at 60th Street. And you said that the university's orientation had changed, that the optics were better, but the university needs to do much more to invest in surrounding communities. I'm wondering if you can say what that looks like. Have you met with President Olivasatos? What did you guys talk about, if so? And whether the city and university...
Okay, that's about 15 questions.
Yeah, I do that a lot. So
yeah, I
whether
know.
you guys have any kind of...
That's why I'm checking you. I have met with the president and had a number of different conversations with him. I think he's going to be a tremendous leader for the university. Obviously, we've had a lot of conversations centered around the tragic murder of the recent graduate. I guess it was just 10 days ago, which is a horrible, horrible tragedy. I think this is the first time I'm speaking about it publicly. I really have to commend the detectives who did literally work tirelessly around the clock, followed some great leads. I want to thank the residents out there who provided a lot of good information, particularly early on, which led to the identification of a vehicle and then led to the identification of the individual who's now charged with the murder of the U of C alum. They just did a tremendous, tremendous job, and they really deserve our incredible appreciation for the work that they did. I believe what I said, remembering this, is, look, when I came to the city in 1986 and lived in Hyde Park, it's a very, very different place than what it is now. And I think the university leadership over the years had recognized that they need to be better partners to the neighbors and the neighborhoods on the South Side. U of C is probably the primary anchor institution, on the South Side of Chicago, from Hyde Park going further south. And so they do have a role to play. And I think the new president understands that importance, understands that history, and I'm confident that he will continue to build upon the success that President Zimmer had in really being a much more welcoming partner, not just in Hyde Park, but really assuming a leadership role on a range of different issues on the South Side.
I want to acknowledge the police work that did result in the capture of the suspect for Mr. Zhang, but the arrest and clearance rate being what it is, it's low. What are you doing to get the clearance rate up in less high-profile cases? Is there an opportunity to use the dramatic rise in shootings and homicides in wealthier neighborhoods to rally public support and increased investments on the south and west sides?
Well, I would push back on your premise. If you recall, not that long ago, the homicide clearance rate was dismally in the teens. It's now about 45%. Not high enough. And as the chief of detectives and the various commanders of the detective division will tell you, this is something that is a topic of conversation at my weekly meetings with the police department. But I will say this, in this year alone, they have solved more homicides on an annualized basis than they've solved in the last 15 years. That is significant progress. So I want to push back on the premise that they're not solving homicides. That's just not true. More homicides this year than in the previous 15 years alone. They are working their tails off. They're using technology. They're engaging with members of the public. I think the work that the superintendent has done in making, requiring every front-facing officer to engage in a community service project every week is paying dividends because the public is seeing them and trusting them in a way that they haven't in a very long time. You cannot get to the rates that they've gotten to without having a measure of public trust and legitimacy. We're not anywhere near where we need to be by a long shot, but I see measurable progress, and I want to, again, thank the hardworking men and women of the detective division on homicides because they think they're doing a yeoman's job. I also want to be clear that putting aside shootings and homicides, which obviously we're all very focused on, we are at 20-plus year lows in every other category of crimes. 20-plus year historic lows. That's an accomplishment.
And Mayor, we're going to end with Coco from Cenovision on your far right.
Okay. Can you speak into the microphone? Thank you.
Speak to the University of Chicago. Last week, the third University of Chicago was killed. Two nearby the campus, and two of them are Chinese. City has any short-term plan can make some change, and to make sure that community members feel safe. Thank you.
Yes, of course, and I think the superintendent has spoken to this, and I'll weigh in again. Immediately after this tragic incident happened, we stepped up patrols in the Hyde Park area. We're working, I think, in a good collaborative way with the University of Chicago Police and looking at opportunities for further engagement. We have talked about and we'll be putting in some additional cameras at strategic locations across the Hyde Park and Kenwood neighborhood. But really this is about making sure that there's visibility, particularly on the 53rd Street corridor, which is the major commercial district in Hyde Park. But it's about communication, and holding ourselves, holding the second district, but also holding the university accountable to make sure that we are working in unison to address these tragic events, but also the uptick that we've seen in crime in that area.
Thanks a lot, Mayor. That's a wrap, everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you.